Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, to another edition of Through the Fire. I am your host, Ryan Wickline, and today we're joined by a very special guest. He is the author of Mountains Within, Dr. Jack Groppel. How you doing
Hey,
today,
Ryan.
Dr. Jack?
Hey, great to be with you, man. Thanks for inviting me on your show.
Hey, I couldn't turn you down when I seen that you have like a similar background in coaching athletics as I do.
Cool.
So,
Yeah, great.
so the number one question the audience is probably wondering: who is Dr. Jack Groppel?
Well, it's that's an interesting question because the answer could go on forever, and your show's too short for that. I'm just really a guy that grew up in Southern Illinois who, on paper, probably should have been a farmer, but was had a really hard driving father, and instead of cowering to his father, he basically developed this achievement addiction that I'll show you. Watch me, and I just start. I mean, from the age I was an Eagle Scout at 13, Ryan. I mean, who does that? I mean, that's crazy. I would never counsel a young person to do that. And then, I was, I had to go to college, and I wanted to go to college, but I taught myself to play tennis. I only had introductory tennis lessons. I taught myself to play, but I told my dad that I was going to walk on and play for the University of Illinois. I was going to play in the Big Ten. And he thought I was absolutely nuts, that I couldn't do it. And if I'm going to Illinois and he's got to pay for it, I've got to study agriculture. So I go to Illinois, I make the team, and I play, and I get my degree in wildlife biology, and couldn't get a job. Couldn't get a job. So I go to grad school like everybody does, right? And I'm in population genetics. So in my brain, I'm thinking I'm going to study migratory habits of wildlife. But do you know how you study genetics? In grad school, you're a research assistant, and you have to go to a lab. You've got to study a species of animal that breeds very quickly, so you can study generations. And then you look at how like pesticides can affect generations and diet and things like that. So my role was 4 times a week I had to go to a laboratory and change the flour in test tubes so these beetle called flower beetles could breed more quickly. So what I love to say to people is at age 22, my job was creating a romantic environment for beetles to have sex. And I'm crying myself to sleep every night. And my sister, bless her heart to this day, she's 10 years older than I am. She said, why don't you go talk? I told her, she just knew how unhappy I was. And she said, why don't you go talk to the people in physical education? And I'm going, well, Dad will kill me because he just doesn't think that's a viable field. Remember, I'm supposed to be a farmer. Everybody in my family are farmers. And my sister Ruth Ann said, just go talk to him. So I made an appointment, and the head of the department met with me graciously, and they admitted me on that day to the Masters of Science program. But he said 2 things. One, he said, one, does that work for you? And I said, I don't know how I'm going to pay for it, because I knew Dad was going to cut me off as soon as he knew this. I was done. And he said, well, how about that? You played tennis, right? I said, yeah, I played here at Illinois. He says, I'm going to waive your tuition and fees. I'm going to give you a small stipend to teach my tennis activity classes. How's that sound? And I went, oh my gosh. He said, but you have to figure out if this is the right field for you. So your first semester, you have to take human cadaver anatomy, exercise physiology, and kinesiology, the hardest 3 courses. But I fell in love with it and got straight A's. And my advisor, my kinesiology professor, who became my advisor, who became a life mentor to me, Chuck Dillman, Dr. Charles Dillman, he said 17 words to me. And I received the Distinguished Alumni Award from Illinois last year. And I quoted Dr. Dillman, these 17 words. He said, this is very important for your listeners, because you never know the words that come out of your mouth might influence someone. And Chuck said to me that day, if you apply yourself, you could become a pioneering leader in the science of tennis performance. And sports science was embryonic in the United States when I was there. I mean, it didn't even exist. Now look at it. I mean,
Yeah.
So I became one of the leaders in sports science worldwide. And I just took off. I got straight A's. I went to Florida State, got my PhD. I finished my coursework. Chuck Dillman calls me. The tennis coaching job's opened up here at Illinois. We want you to fly up and interview for the job. So now I'm the youngest NCAA coach in the nation, and I'm also a professor. And I did it for 4 years. And by this time, see, I'd been building my reputation, and now I'm starting to work with players on the tour. So I only coached the men's team for 4 years, and then I'm traveling for Nike. And this is all in my book. I become one of the really the first sports scientists. I'm taking high-speed films at Madison Square Garden. I mean, it's just incredible. I mean, you can't even make this stuff up. You know, Nike flies me to San Francisco to work with John McEnroe in shoe design. I'm taking films of John and his movement. And again, this is 16 millimeter film. Video didn't exist yet. The video didn't even exist. And then I got tenure, and I got a joint appointment in the Department of Bioengineering. Illinois is one of the top engineering schools in the world. And I got tenure, so I've got a job for life. Then I become the founding chairman of the Sports Science Committee for the United States Tennis Association. Now I start traveling all over the world, representing U.S. tennis and also the International Tennis Federation in coaching education. And and then I got a job offer. Here I am tenured. My father turns over in his grave every time I tell this part of the story, because I got offered the director of player development at the Harry Hopman Saddlebrook International Tennis Program north of Tampa. So I quit. I gave up tenure. And I moved to Tampa to become a tennis coach, and because that was my dream. And everything went great. And then Dr. Jim Lair was the head of sports psychology at Nick Bollettieri's, and Jim just passed away 3 weeks ago. Your listeners might be aware of that, which is just tragic for the world. We lost a true pioneer. But Jim was at Bollettieri's, and in 1991, we made a decision to kind of roll the dice. And in 1992, we started our business with our own money in 2 3-bedroom condominiums. And lo and behold, we moved to Orlando 3 years later because we needed space and land. And then we changed our name to the Human Performance Institute in 2003. And then in 2008, we sold our business to Johnson & Johnson. And part of that, I became on the speaking tour. I was on the largest speaking tour in the United States. So I'm in front of 30,000 people with Margaret Thatcher, Mikhail Gorbachev. So the whole tennis thing, the speaking thing, and the business thing. But yet at the same time now, you want to know who I am. I had this father wound all along and really didn't get over that till I was in my mid-40s. And then I'm divorced 3 times. And I tell the whole story in the book, because your people that are watching can see behind me. When my son, he's adopted from China, when he was 12 years old, we summited Mount Kilimanjaro, and I have artificial knees. And it was on Kilimanjaro that I said, if I write my story, I have to tell the whole story, not just the really cool stuff that everybody's seen on the outside, but everything that's happened, the whole tapestry of the dad wound, the marriages, and then the wildly successful professional life. So that's who I am. And that's a very long-winded answer, but that's who I am.
I love that you were vulnerable in writing your book and told the ugliness too and the failures along with the success.
Well, I had to, and that's the feedback that I'm getting, that it's really helping people, because what they're realizing is that a lot of people, see, I dedicated the book to anyone that ever felt they had to please someone, or anybody that ever felt they weren't good enough. That's the dedication of the book. And I believe there's a lot of people out there that's the feedback I'm getting from people that read the book, that it's been very, very helpful to them.
Yeah. So you coached NCAA tennis, right?
I did.
What were the traits you noticed that the high performers had that others didn't?
Well, it's really interesting. What separates great from good is mental. It's not the strokes. I mean, the strokes they're all really, really good, but the mental piece is, and it's surprising, the mental piece. Show me the ones that really love competing more than winning. They want to win more than anything, but they actually love competing more than winning. And if they lose, it's like, all right, you got me today, you won't get me tomorrow. And that's what starts to separate. And then after that, then it becomes movement. It becomes fitness. I think, and then you get into the technique and everything else. But the technique is pretty well there. It gets into the mental side in a huge way.
Yeah. So mindset, you would say, is probably one of the most important factors that you've seen at that level then.
Yeah, that separates great from good, for sure.
So how do you go about developing some of those mindset characteristics then?
Well, I think many coaches, what you have to do is we try to start teaching this stuff mentally. I mean, we try to start teaching it cognitively. Like, in other words, here's how you do it. when in fact, the way to do it is experiential. Dr. Jim Lair, who did the 16-second cure in the mid 80s, and what it was, I think it was, and by the way, I've publicly said this, I think it was one of the greatest contributions to sport in the 20th century. What he did, he studied the between point time in tennis, in world-class tennis. And he found that the greatest players in the world had very, very similar habits in the 20-second interval between points. And he called it the 16-second cure. And what he did then was create experiences. It's kinesthetic learning. You create experiences to improve confidence. You create experiences on how to manage mistakes. You create experiences on how to visualize. You create experiences on positive affirmations. You see what I'm getting at? So yeah. You can teach all this cognitively, as we say in the South, till the cows come home, but you're not going to learn anything unless you experience it.
Yeah. Like, I think visualization and affirmations are so important when you're competing anyways. And then having get the same routine to warm up and all that. This
comes back to the experiential piece, because I mean, take a basketball free throw shooter. The person, he or she, they could make 100 free throws in a row in the gym in practice, and then they get into the game, no time left on the clock, down by 2, clank.
Yeah.
And because they haven't practiced it the right way, they haven't practiced it under some kind of pressure. And that's where the experience comes in. That's where, when you hear them talk about that's a rookie move and things like that, you've got to have the experience. So great coaches create experiences that enable athletes to learn to perform on demand under pressure. That's key. Perform on demand under pressure.
Yeah, I love that. What traits and characteristics did you look for in kids when you were recruiting them?
Well, when you're recruiting, you've got to get the, as Jim Collins said in his book, Built to Last, you got to get the right people on the bus and in the right seats. You got to get the players, you got to get the talent. So you look for talent, and, it's fascinating right now, because the big argument is all the international athletes that are coming to the United States in all different sports, especially in tennis and golf, though the international athletes are incredible, how many there are. But it's a global sport. Tennis is a global sport. You're not going to get, you've got as many internationals, and you could argue, well, yeah, but it's American colleges. Yeah, but it's an international sport. I mean, you could argue any way you want, but the idea is that you have to recruit talent. So then once you get the talent that you believe will fit your system, then you've got to develop that talent. Now here we are though in a world of NIL. And even in what's tennis being a non-revenue sport, it's to the point now where somebody's getting paid $25,000, $30,000, they're going to go. And so recruiting is a lot different than it used to be when I was recruiting. It's very different now.
Yeah. What do you think about NIL?
Well, it had to happen. Something had to happen, because there was too much inequity, especially for the revenue sports of football and basketball, where there was so much money, and the kids, I mean, they almost felt like slave labor. I mean, it really was difficult to manage. However, now having said that, I don't think it was handled very well in how it's all been started. I mean, listen to the conversations we're having now, putting salary caps on coaches, putting salary caps on schools. They already have a cap, but then they can go out and raise money, and then now they're dealing with, sharing income, revenue sharing. I mean, come on. So, I mean, I think it's a mess right now. And everybody says this. I'm not the only person saying this. All the pundits are saying what a mess it is right now. And somebody's got to get in control of it.
Yeah, I completely agree with that too, because you're looking at all these kids transferring. They'll have like one maybe sit in the bench, and then they'll transfer like 4 times in 4 different schools. It's like, what are you doing?
Well, you got to understand, again, the mentality. I don't blame the kids sometimes, but this is the mentality. And there's no judgment, by the way, in what I'm going to say right now, because a lot of people, I think, are judging this mentality. But we've created this monster that instead of where the coach is going, yeah, you want to come to this school because of how loyal we are. Look at our fan base. We're going to travel well. We'll support you. Now you know what they're getting? How much are you going to pay me?
Yeah.
That's what it is right now. And now, again, I'm not judging anyone, because we have created this monster. What we have to do is step back and not judge, but figure out, okay, what do we need to do? But that's the situation. It's very different recruiting now than it was when I was recruiting.
Yeah.
But I'm very close to college sports. I'm follow it. I mean, I live 8 miles from Florida Gulf Coast University. It's a Division I school. I go to a lot of their athletic events. I'm a huge fan and follower, and it's a different animal than it used to be.
Yeah. Yeah, it's way more competitive, and we're seeing how much with the money on the line, with the how like cutthroat it can be.
Yeah, it's. I mean, you're picking off people that have already committed to a university, and they're picking them off by saying, "Here, I'll give you more money."
Yeah, crazy.
I mean, again, we've created this.
Yep. You spent decades helping others perform at the highest level. When did you realize something was missing in your own life?
Oh gosh. Well, there was a time I hit rock bottom. 1996, I was hospitalized. I had a knee surgery, and I got a staph infection, and I was hospitalized for 15 days. The infection, I had a PICC line into my heart to put the antibiotic directly into my heart because they couldn't find an antibiotic. I was hospitalized for 15 days, and I'm very embarrassed to say this, but I say it in the book, and I'm very open and public about it now. In 15 days, Ryan, I only had one person come to visit me outside my family. Now, I got a lot of phone calls. I'm not going to say I didn't get phone calls, but I only had one person come to visit me. And it hit me so hard that I had developed this reputation, and people knew who I was, especially in tennis. And, then I was a research associate for the U.S. Olympic Training Center too. And again, traveling all over the world, people knew who I was, but what I realized, and this is for your listeners, I realized I hadn't invested energy into other people. I had helped a lot of people. I had taught a lot of people, but I hadn't invested energy into their lives. And I said, this has got to stop. So when I got out of the hospital, I got on a path to improve my connection with my faith. And that played a huge role. And that was the big first step, was recommitment to my faith. And then though, in 2008, I went to China and adopted my son by myself. And I have an entire chapter in the book about the adoption because I went by myself. And this is where I say that God has a sense of humor, because he's going to send a man in his 50s to China by himself, or they're going to put a screaming 4-year-old in his arms that hates his guts. And he's going to teach this man and this child how to love each other because they can't talk. The kid doesn't know English and the man doesn't know Mandarin. So good luck, guys.
Yeah, God definitely does have a sense of humor.
And that was the most significant 2 weeks of my life. Most life-changing 2 weeks of my life.
Nice. So how did adopting your son teach you about success, strength, and leadership?
Well, love. I mean, it comes down to agape love, unconditional agape kind of love. Not the romantic love that we hear about all the time, but agape love, unconditional love of another human being. He depended on me. I depended on him. I didn't know anybody in China. I mean, here he is. I mean, this little kid became so playful with me. And I talk about this in the book, that in the second week, we had gotten so close within a matter of days that one of the phrases they teach you when you go in Mandarin, I couldn't speak Mandarin, but they taught me some phrases. And they said, one, you must learn. In English, it means stop doing what you're doing, because they said you're going to have a toddler. So he's a little bit of a scamp, and he'll probably push your buttons. So you need to understand this phrase, stop doing what you're doing. And the way you say it in Mandarin is bo yao zar yang. So I must have been saying it way too much, Ryan, because now we're into the second week and he was jumping up and down on the bed, and I go, his name is Shen. I go, Shen, bo yao zar yang. This little scamp jumps off the bed, starts swaggering toward me. He goes, bo yao zar yang, making fun of this old white man, this little Chinese kid. And I'm going, you got to be kidding me. I started laughing so hard, Ryan, because I'm getting played by a 4-year-old, and I'm trying to do my best, and I just broke out laughing. That was the moment that I realized a star was born in my son. Not me, in him.
So how would you say your faith played a part in connecting you two together?
Well, when I went, it was literally, I said this phrase in the car, there but by the grace of God go I. And what happened the first night, again, all these stories are told in the book, and I narrated the audiobook too, which is kind of cool when people, if they prefer audiobooks. The first night we get back to the hotel, he's been crying. Poor kid was screaming that I was kidnapping him. He was grieving. Got to understand, we pulled him from everything he knew that was safe. And he's crying, and the translator is with us and escorts us up to the room. We walk in our hotel room. He shows him a toilet for the first time in his life. My little son, all he'd ever seen before was a flat receptacle in the floor. So he shows him a toilet. We walk out, and I'm a mess. I'm like a wired nerve ending. And the translator looks at me and says, "All right, Mr. Groppel, I'm sorry now, but I have to leave." And I said, "No, you don't, dude." I said, "I'll pay you $1,000 just to stay for a couple more hours. You have no idea. I cannot do this." He goes, "No, I can't stay. I can't accept your money. But I will tell you, there's 2 things you must do." And I said, "Okay, what are those?" And he says, number one, he's almost 4 years old. He knows how to unlock the door. He's going to run on you tonight. And I'm going, "Well, what do I do with that?" He goes, you'll be fine, but just be aware that he'll try to escape. I'm going, "God, well, what's number 2? What's number 2? And he says, "Whatever you do, don't give him a bath." And he was filthy. I said, "Why not?" He goes, "Because it'll push him further away from you." And I said, "Well, that can't happen. So, okay, no bath." So the translator leaves. And I can't take this kid out in public. He's crying. He's dirty. I'm going, okay, so I order room service. Now, while we're eating a sandwich, room service, I'm looking around the room. I'm trying to figure out the escape artist. And there's a crib in the room, because when you're an adoption family, they don't know how old your child is. So there was a crib in the room. And I'm going, okay, he can't sleep in the crib. So what we'll do, we'll put the crib in front of the door. And I'm a light sleeper. So if he moves the crib, I'll hear him, and I'll get him before he gets away. All right. So we put the tray outside, and then I have him help me move the crib and make a little game out of it. I put him on the end of the bed, and there's cartoons on. I can't. They're in Mandarin. I can't understand, but he's watching cartoons. And I go to it's a king size bed, hotel room, and I go sit in the desk. And I'm looking at my son, and he's crying. And I said in that moment, I said, "God, what do you want me to do? Because I've got nothing for this kid. I've got nothing. What do you want me to do?" And while I was being quiet, I heard on my heart, "Give him a bath." And I just said, and I actually said this in English. I went, "Did you hear what the translator said?" And then I said, "I'm going to ask you one more time. What do you want me to do?" And I was quiet, and I felt absolutely convinced 100%, you've got to give him a bath. Okay. So I take him in. Now he starts screaming again because he's scared. Taking his clothes off scares him. So I'm not going to wash his hair, no soap in the eyes, no private parts. All I do is wash his shoulders and his feet. That's all I did. Get him out of the tub. I put him in a pair of pajamas that I'd brought with me. I gave him a sippy cup of apple juice, not another tear the rest of the night, and he slept right next to me all night long. And God,
Amazing.
without God answering that prayer, I would have never given him a bath.
Yeah.
That night
Wow.
would have probably been a struggle.
Yeah, that's a pretty amazing story, because, that goes against everything that everybody told you not to do.
It went against absolute logic. That's why I said, "Did you hear what the translator said to me?" Really? And that was my
Nice.
faith. I said, "Okay, let's go give him a bath." And I'm nervous. He's crying again. I was really nervous, but by the grace of God go I.
Yeah. You said achievement can become addictive. What does that look like, and how do people break that cycle?
Well, we live in a world where it's easy to get sucked into that because you're rewarded, you're paid well if you do well. And I think what you have to do is answer the question, what matters most right now? For me, I was trying to get the love of my father. That's really, as I look back on my young adult life, that's all I was trying to do. I was just wanting him to recognize me and get praise. That's all I was seeking. And I'd never had a role model who taught me all this. All my mentors, they were wonderful mentors. I talk about all of them in the book, but nobody ever taught me about relationships. And so the struggle was that I couldn't respond to myself because it was just go, go, go. It was once I won an award, I got it. What's next? So in the very same year in 1987, I became a master professional in the United States Professional Tennis Association, the highest honor the highest rank you can get. And in the same year, I received the National Teaching Pro of the Year by the organization. So I became the #1 teaching pro in the United States and a master professional in the same meeting. So, and then it was just what's next, and then what's next, and then what's next. And I think it's easy to get caught in that cycle. So I would ask your listeners to always ask yourself, what matters most right now? Does my family matter most? See, I believed the old paradigm. They knew what they were getting into when they married me. And I believed the old paradigm where my role is to provide. When in fact, yes, I was to provide, but they didn't know they were getting into the achievement addiction. They saw that I was successful, but they thought that I'd have energy for them. And I never did. And that's what happened to me.
Yeah. So how did you end up finding that balance?
Well, it was the commitment to my faith that and my father and I we had a come to Jesus moment. And what happened, that large speaking tour that I was on, I mentioned earlier, we were in St. Louis. And it was called the Kiel Center now. I don't remember what the name of it is. It's the large indoor arena where the Blues play. And we were in there. And this is the largest seminar in the United States. So we're in front of 20,000 people live. My mom and dad were in the arena that day. Dad had never come to watch me play tennis and never had come to see me speak. So this is his first experience, me in front of 20,000 people. I'm following a very famous radio broadcaster by the name of Paul Harvey. And Paul Harvey's in the Radio Hall of Fame, very famous radio announcer. He's passed away. And then I was preceding Mikhail Gorbachev, the former president of the Soviet Union. So so nobody knows who I am. So Ryan, I'm a good bathroom break. So because nobody knows who I am, Paul Harvey, Mikhail Gorbachev, I'm going to go to the bathroom while this guy talks. So I had 20 seconds to keep everybody in their seats. I had a little shtick that I had, kept everybody seated. And I told everybody that I was from the area, hometown guy, and I proceeded to probably give the talk of my life. I got a standing ovation in front of 20,000 people that didn't know who I was. And when I went out into the arena, I was going to sign autographed books. I go out there, and Dad and Mom are there. We take a nice picture. The picture, that picture before this confrontation happens is in the book. And I said to Dad, what'd you think? He goes, son, you're pretty good, but Paul Harvey was by far the best speaker of the whole day. And I'm going, and in that moment I said, I'll never be good enough because I'm never going to be in a situation like this in front of you again, ever. And it was in that moment that I said, I don't have to please my earthly father anymore. And that's where my faith kicked in, that my dad was not who I had to please anymore. I had to have a life to glorify God. And that's what I started doing. And that's how I found the balance.
Yeah. Why do you think so many people...
That's how I started finding the balance. I didn't find it quite yet. That's how I started finding the balance.
Yeah. So why do you think so many people leave out the spiritual part when they're doing personal development and trying to become a better person?
I think it's just uncomfortable. I think that's the only reason. I mean, I don't know. I really don't. Your listeners would have to ask that question. But as you answer the question, what matters most right now? What is your answer to that? Because in many ways, that answer is spiritual. You might say that I love my family, but that is a depth of love that is spiritual in nature. That's not emotional love. See, that's not sexual love. That's deep love of family. And that is spiritual in and of itself. So the idea that we don't want to go there, the whole spiritual thing, yes, it was my faith that mattered to me, but for other people, I just tell my story. I don't try to proselytize, but I tell people to keep seeking, find out what truth is, because we live in a world of relative truth. Truth is what somebody says. It's what I believe versus somebody else. It's not absolute truth, which I believe can be found biblically, but the idea that we live in a world of relative truth, and that's how we live our lives, is relatively, not absolute. Like, what is truth? I mean, now we're getting pretty deep, but I think your listeners need to always ask what matters most right now.
Yeah, I think everything interconnects between mind, body, and spirit. Anyways, that the only way to keep improving yourself is to focus on the spiritual part first, and God will lead you through the rest.
Yeah, and how we did that at the Human Performance Institute, we always help people understand purpose. Like, what is your purpose? And by the way, the reason a lot of people don't go there is they don't think it's good enough. Like, somebody who's a young person, I'll never forget this. I was in Buenos Aires, Argentina, and speaking, and I was talking about purpose, and we took a break, and a young man comes up to me and he says, Dr. Jack, I don't think I can do this purpose exercise. And I said, why not? And he says, because I'm too young. And I went, really? Well, what do you mean by that? He says, well, I just don't think I have enough experience to develop a purpose yet. And I said, well, okay, tell me what matters most to you right now, this moment. He says, well, I still live at home. He said, don't judge me. He was cute. You know, he's in his 22, 21. I still live at home. I love my mom and dad. I've got a girlfriend and my job. He says, I want to help people. And I said, what a valiant purpose. You want to
Yeah.
help people. You want to help people and you're committed to your mom and dad. I said, what a wonderful way of life right now. And then I said to him, I said, if you got married later on, would your purpose change? Oh, yeah. What if you had kids? Would it change? Oh, yeah. What about later in life if you had grandkids? Oh, it'd probably change again. I said, you're right. See, our purpose can change. It can fluctuate what matters most to us throughout our lives. But it's what matters most right now, and there's no judgment. If you want to make a lot of money, go ahead. I mean, but understand the consequences of that being your purpose. If you're just chasing the dollar.
Yeah.
Like
I
I was
like how
chasing
you,
fame. I was chasing fame. So you got to be careful what you're chasing.
yeah. I like how you talk about how your purpose can change and what's important right now.
Mm-hmm.
Like, because so many people don't understand that, yeah, your purpose will change over time, that each step you take, like, will lead you to a different purpose.
That's right. Exactly. 100%. You will, as you grow and develop, your purpose will change. Now, if you're a person of faith, I mean, it's not like you're going to change your belief in God, but the application of that belief in God might change, like how it applies to my marriage, how it applies to my children, how it applies. You see what I'm saying?
Yeah. What lessons from sports science apply most to everyday health, stress, and relationships?
Well, the biggest takeaway from sports science, I mean, the aha moment in sport came before the concept of sports science really existed. There was in the early 1900s, there was a physical exercise called the Harvard Step Test. And what they did, you exercised for like 2 minutes, I think it is. I don't remember the time. I'll butcher the time. I'm just going to use it as a metaphor. But you exercise for a certain period of time. Then you sit down and they measure how quickly you recover. And what they came up with was how quickly you recovered was a measure of your fitness. And then what we started looking at was recovery, physically, emotionally, mentally, and spiritually. And this is what Jim Blair did so beautifully in the 16-second cure, because the between point time in tennis is recovery time. Your heart rate, we did heart rate studies, and heart rates can get as high as 170, 180 beats a minute playing a point. And then you got 20 seconds. You can lower it to 140, maybe 130. But you could play a 5-hour match with your heart rate at that level. I mean, tennis players are among the fittest athletes in the world. But it's how you get in control of your physiology and your psychology in that 20 seconds to play the next point. So that idea of recovery, I think, is the most important lesson, because what we're doing in life is we just go, 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 go. And the way we live our life is like that rock skimming across the surface. We all did that when we were kids, try to fly in the flat rock and then skip it across the surface of the lake. That's how we're living our life. We just go, 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 and we can't go deep. That rock won't go deep until it slows down. When the rock slows down, it goes deep into the water. When we slow down and take a break, we can go deep. So when recovery happens, so the idea that stress is not bad. Stress is actually the stimulus for growth. Recovery is when growth occurs. If you have no recovery in your life, you have no growth. And that's probably the biggest lesson from sports science.
Huh. So how would you recommend, like, recovering on a daily basis then?
Well, you can build recovery in throughout your day. We did a study in 2016, and your listeners can look this up. We wanted to look at, so understand that physical stress is one thing, mental stress is different. To recover from mental stress, you might exercise. You might use physical stress to recover from mental stress. You see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So just because, don't think that all stress is equal. There's physical, emotional, mental, and spiritual. And when you understand that what kind of recovery do I need, then you can start applying it. So the idea of what we did was we wanted to look at physical stress and the role in the workday. So we had a control group that did nothing throughout their workday. We had another group, an experimental group, that did 30 minutes on a treadmill early in the morning and then nothing. We controlled diet and everything else. And then we had another experimental group that did 5 minutes, 5 minutes, 5 minutes at different intervals throughout the day. The one that did the short bursts, everything improved. Energy, appetite, everything was better throughout the whole day than the other two groups. The worst group was the one that did nothing. And that's unfortunately how we live our life. We sit at the desk or we just go with no physical activity. So the idea is that mental stress just builds up, and so you can use physical movement throughout your day to get mental and emotional recovery.
Amazing. And that's why I don't understand why people don't realize that like movement is good for you.
Yeah, I'm one of the spokespersons for the CEO Pledge for Physical Activity, and we're getting people. Your listeners can look this up. We're getting people, CEOs of any size company, to sign on to commit that they want their people to be active. They want to be organizations in motion, because what they're realizing is the more physically active they are, the better they perform.
Nice.
Yeah.
What habits have you noticed that successful athletes and successful leaders have?
Well, in 1983, I developed a term called the corporate athlete. And I believe there's a great leader in all of us. And that's where I think the great leader can learn from sport, from high performance in sport, we talked about earlier, how to visualize, how to get ready for a presentation, how to motivate your team without telling them. I mean, great leaders, it's their behaviors that gets people to follow them. It's not their words. Greatly, and that's what's true with athletes. Athletes, the greatest. Look at Wayne Gretzky or Michael Jordan. They just got the work. They just got the job done. They didn't have to talk about how good they were. I mean, it's amazing how great they were by their behaviors, and that's what great leaders do as well. They don't have to tell people how great they are, or tell people to follow them. They model the behaviors.
Yeah, I completely agree with that. Like I was telling a lot of people before, like for me working with athletes, like if you would just structure what these athletes do, I mean, like the mindset stuff that they do, like the exercises they do, like the affirmations, visualization, all that, and like just the taking action part in your daily habits, that you as a like a leader, corporate leader, could grow too exponentially.
Yeah, and they have a huge belief in themselves. Again, I know his example is used a lot, but it's a great word picture, and that is Michael Jordan. I mean, everybody knows the story about Michael Jordan being cut from his either junior high or high school basketball team. What would have happened if Michael Jordan said, "I don't want to play basketball anymore because I got cut"? First of all, I wouldn't want to be the coach that cut Michael Jordan, first of all. But anyway, maybe that helped Michael have a drive. But don't give up. I mean, the story of Abraham Lincoln, where he lost like 8 elections before he ever won an election, yet he became one of our greatest presidents. I mean, there's all these stories out there of people that had the stick-to-itiveness and the perseverance, and they learned to use their God-given talent, and then they trained. They didn't let up on their training, and they did things that nobody thought anybody could do.
Yeah. Like I think failure is a good motivator and a good teacher.
Yeah, in my book, I talk about the equation, luck equals opportunity plus preparation. And I believe that if you prepare really, really hard, when opportunities present themselves, you might just get lucky. So the idea that preparation in life is key, no matter who you are. If you want to learn to speak, then start speaking. Join organizations where you can speak. Speak at your church if you want to be a speaker. Do it, and then when the opportunities present themselves, you'll be ready. So it's like, I'm going to prepare, I'm going to work, and then when the opportunity presents itself, some people might call me lucky, but I busted. A lot of people would call me lucky with my lifestyle, but I busted my rear end to get what I did.
Yeah, I don't think there was any luck involved. Right? It's usually a lot of hard work and grit that nobody sees behind the scenes.
But then the opportunities present themselves, and when the door opens, you burst through it. You don't just walk through it, you burst through it.
Yeah. You wrote your memoir, Mountains Within. What inspired you to write it?
Well, my son and I, when he was 12 years old, Well, first of all, let me give you a little context. When I was 20, my father, we were estranged. He calls me in the spring, and I had been injured that year. I didn't play that year, and I knew I was going to play a lot of tournaments the summer before my senior year to get ready for the season. And Dad called me, and he said, tell your coach you're not going to play many tournaments. We're going to take a trip. And I'm going, what do you mean we're going to take a trip? Now, remember, we don't get along. I mean, this is a little rough around the edges. He says, we're going to drive from St. Louis area to Alaska. And I said, we're going to do what? And I said, how far is that? He says, out and back, I think a little over 4,000 miles. I'm going, Dad, how long are we going to be gone? 6 weeks. I'm going to put a cover over the pickup truck and we'll sleep in that. You cook, I'll do all the dishes. I'm going, Dad, we'll kill ourselves. This won't work. He goes, no, we're going to do it. So we did it. We were gone for 6 weeks and we almost did kill ourselves. But that was the beginning of my dad and I reconciling. And when I adopted my son, I was an older father, obviously. I wanted to determine something. I wanted to have an adventure like that with him. And I'm kind of a go home or go big kind of a guy. And I found out that Kilimanjaro in Tanzania was the highest mountain in the world that you could actually hike. There's no technical climbing needed. And I said, I want to do this. So I talked to his mom and she agreed. And then I talked to him. We went out to Rocky Mountain National Park. He's a cleft palate young man, and I didn't know how he'd respond to altitude. So we were at 12,000 feet, and he did pretty well. And I said, do you want to go higher? He goes, how much higher? I said, about a mile vertically. He goes, in the United States? And I said, no, in Africa. And he goes, yeah. So when he was 12 years old, and I have artificial knees, so I was 65, artificial knees and a 12-year-old, and we summited Mount Kilimanjaro. And it was on the mountain that I started reflecting on my life. And you got to understand that a lot of people had told me that they felt I should write a memoir earlier, but all they saw was all the cool stuff I did, the speaking, the business, the tennis, traveled to 52 countries. You know, they didn't see the hell from my dad and the marriages. And it was on Kilimanjaro that I realized that the mountain was exactly like my life. I was exhilarated, yet terrorized. I had anxiety, yet excitement. And I said, this is exactly like my life's been. I said, so if I write my memoir, it's got to be the whole story. So the book, the entire introduction is on Mount Kilimanjaro, reflecting on my life. And then we start with chapter 1 of my childhood with my dad. And then it goes through, and then the end of the book is at the summit of Mount Kilimanjaro.
Nice. What was probably the biggest challenge you faced when you were writing it?
The vulnerability, the fear of judgment. You get to be my stage in life, you don't care anymore. I think there has to be a point when you write a book like this that you really want to help people more than you care about what people think about you. I made sure not to hurt anyone. I didn't want to hurt anyone. There are a couple of people in my life that asked not to be in the book. They're not in the book, and I respected their wishes. But anybody that is regarded in the book, I made sure that the book is about me and my situation, not anyone else's quote unquote fault or anything like that. So it is my story 100%.
Yeah, nice. So was it kind of a healing journey too, letting it go?
Very cathartic, very therapeutic to do this, to write this book. Very cathartic. Incredibly helpful, actually, for me.
Yeah. So what's probably the biggest takeaway you want your readers to get from it?
Well, what I want the readers to understand, two things. One, you can do anything you want within your God-given talent. If you train and you really work hard, you can do anything you want. Now, let's clarify that, because I know that sounds like motivational speak. Shaquille O'Neal is 7'2". He could not be a jockey in the Kentucky Derby. His God-given talent isn't there. But likewise, a Kentucky Derby jockey couldn't be a center in the NBA. So that's the word picture. Take your God-given talent, whatever you're talented with, then prepare and work and work and work. And I believe you can be anything you want within that realm. Then that's number one. Number two then is always ask yourself the question, what matters most right now? Always recalibrate. And I would do it every day. I would do it every day. I would do it at different intervals during the day. If you start to flip out, if you start to get angry about something, what matters most right now? What matters most right now? Maybe you do have to discipline an employee if you're a leader. Maybe you do, but maybe you want to figure out how you do it the best way. But what matters most right now? Those are the two things. Number one, the idea of luck equals opportunity plus preparation. Prepare really, really hard. And number 2, what matters most right now.
Love it. Love it.
Thank
So
you.
how can people get a hold of you?
Probably on LinkedIn is the best place on social media. My Instagram is Jack Groppel1. LinkedIn is just my name, Jack Groppel, and connect with me in one of those 2 places. Those are where I'm the most active by far. I am on YouTube, but probably Instagram or LinkedIn. And then that's probably the best way to reach me.
Yeah. When's your book being released?
It's just out released now, and that's my website. They can go to, if they want to, they can get it on Amazon, or they can go to my website, jackgroppel.net, and sign up to get emails and things from me and get updates, and they can get the book either from Amazon or go to my website, jackgroppel.net.
Awesome. I'll post that all in the show notes too.
I appreciate that very much.
Is there anything we haven't covered that you want to talk about?
No, I think this has been great. I hope it's helpful to your listeners, and I look forward to hearing from people if they've got comments and thoughts.
Awesome. All right. Final question.
Sure.
What is one piece of advice you'd like to leave our listeners with about overcoming adversity?
It's hard to soar with the eagles when you're surrounded by turkeys. What do I mean by that? What do I mean by that? Everybody wants to soar, but then you don't surround yourself with good mentors. It's all about mentors and mentee. In the end of my book, I talk about being a mentor and having a mentor. And if you are a younger person or you're trying to strive to do something, find someone who can mentor you. If you're further along in life and you've had some kind of success, and it doesn't need to be business, maybe you've had a successful marriage, maybe you can mentor someone who's younger. But I use that phrase colloquially because it's kind of it gets everybody's attention about if you're surrounded by turkeys. But the idea is surround yourself with smart people and wise people, and then you get good wisdom fed into your heart and soul, and that's how to soar with the eagles.
Nice. I've never heard that phrase before.
Oh, you have it? Okay.
Yeah, I like that. Well, Jack, I can't thank you enough for coming on here.
It's great to be with you, Ryan. Thank you for having me.
Hey, my pleasure. Well, guys, that's going to be all the time we have here today. Remember, the only way to get what you want is go through the fire.